Yeah, so there's very little research on this, but a study done a few years back found that roughly 5% of gamers were using prescription drugs, and roughly 5% using a prescription stimulant. And there was another study a few years back, I think 2017, 2018, which said that roughly 2 or 3% of gamers were using these sorts of things. So I think somewhere between kind of 2 and 5% seems like a kind of decent guess, although far higher numbers in all cases, well into the double digits, use things like coffee and sports drinks and things of this sort. And adderall, which is often used to treat ADHD, is often reported as being very common in esports and gaming. Although whether this is true or not isn't quite as clear, as there's very little research on this right now.
So these stimulants are there to keep gamers alert because they're in the one place staring at a screen for hours on end.
Essentially, yes, yes. A large part of kind of what gamers talk about when they talk about things like adderall is this kind of promotion of focus, of very high levels of attention, and this is useful in games and gaming in general, but this is particularly useful in kind of higher level competitive gaming and in esports. With that said, though, it's still not clear whether adderall and things of this sort do in fact help or not. Some gamers say it does, some say it doesn't. It's not really clear at this point.
Okay, so Mark, there is this drive then to make esport an Olympic sport. So how big is esport in gaming now? How has it reached these levels where organisers have an eye on the Olympic Games?
Yeah, so I mean, esports now is a multi-million-dollar sector, which cuts across lots of games and genres and countries and online and offline play and all these sorts of things. And esports prizes for some of the biggest competitions are now in the millions of dollars, as is its numbers of spectators for some of its biggest events. And the push, I think, for esports at the Olympics specifically, it's not something that all esports players or just gamers in general have any kind of key interest in, but it's more seen as some of the more professional and some of the more industrial actors within this space as a way to kind of boost and to gain legitimacy for gaming and esports, and is therefore worth pursuing on those grounds alone.
So what is the pathway to becoming included in the Olympics, Mark, and how is the World Anti-Doping Agency involved in that?
Yeah, so I think that there's a number of aspects here. I think one part, of course, is essentially convincing the Olympics as a body that esports is something which makes sense to be included, and I think that's tricky on institutional grounds in quite a range of ways. I think also one of the key challenges here is getting esports to a kind of level of public acceptance as something which should or could be there. Even though esports is huge now for gaming and gamers, it hasn't really spread or expanded beyond gaming all that much. And so I think a lot of people would sort of instinctively challenge, should competitive gaming be a sporting slash athletic event? And also I think the fact that esports, of course, much like sports or athletics, is not a single thing, but consists instead of many games and many genres and so on. And so finding good ways, I think, to articulate and translate what's going on in esports games, which in terms of rules tend to be far more complex than athletics or sports, and kind of translating what's going on in League of Legends or Counter-Strike or something to the non-gaming viewer. I think finding ways to translate and explain that will be something which is quite challenging, but also very important if esports is to make it to the Olympics in the end.